Chinese called them warm, friendly and earnest, but they're still insisting on an agreement by September. From Peking, Brian Hanrahan.
China gave Sir Geoffrey Howe a double-edged welcome. The Chinese foreign minister met him on the tarmac and simultaneously released a statement repeating that China will announce its own plans for Hong Kong if there's no agreement by September. Britain rejects the Chinese deadline, but accepts it complicates an already difficult position. The British say the Foreign Secretary is here to take a ministerial overview of the long-running negotiations, and they caution that his presence doesn't mean an agreement is about to be signed. But if Sir Geoffrey cannot go beyond the normal formula that the talks are useful and constructive, it's bound to have an unsettling effect on Hong Kong opinion, which has pinned great hopes on such a high-level meeting. The ministerial talks are taking place in the same buildings, the state guest houses, and under the same conditions of secrecy as the regular Hong Kong negotiations. The secrecy maintained more by Britain than by China. The outlines of any agreements are plain from China's public statements on the issue. Britain is to give up all claims to sovereignty after 1997, and in return, China will promise the people of Hong Kong an unchanged way of life for 50 years. But the reluctance of British officials to be drawn on when such an agreement might be signed suggests that there's still plenty of negotiating on the detail to be done. By the evening banquet, an essential part of the Chinese negotiating process, there was talk of considerable progress, but also of further work needed for an agreement.
Excellent relations which exist between Britain and China encourage me in the view that we can reach an agreement under which Hong Kong's stability and prosperity can be maintained.
But that was all. Sir Geoffrey was giving nothing further away, at least not in public.
The Nicaraguan government has admitted that guerrillas backed by America have captured a port near the border with Costa Rica. The capture of San Juan del Norte follows 4 days of heavy fighting. And the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Jean Kirkpatrick, has defended the mining of Nicaraguan harbors by the CIA. She said it was legal because of Nicaragua's aggression against its neighbors, but it's led a Democratic senator, Daniel Moynihan, to resign from his important job on the Senate's Intelligence Committee. He said the CIA didn't tell the committee that it was mining the harbors. 10 people have been murdered in a New York apartment. 8 of them were children. They were all shot through the head, but a 2-year-old child was found unharmed. Police think the murders may be linked to feuds between rival drug dealers. In South Africa, US Marines formed an honor guard when the bodies of 2 American diplomats were flown to Pretoria. The men were killed in neighboring Namibia when guerrillas blew up a petrol station. Their bodies are being taken home to the United States. The Russians are still refusing to say whether they'll send a team to the Olympic Games this summer. The Soviet Olympic Committee says a final decision won't be made until the end of May. At a news conference today in Moscow, Soviet Olympic officials repeated their complaints about preparations for the Games. They're especially concerned about housing and security at the Games Village in Los Angeles. Prince Andrew has arrived in Los Angeles on a 4-day visit. While he's in California, he'll be the guest of the British Olympic Association. Brian Barron was there to see him arrive.
This is the wealthiest enclave in the whole of California, so nothing was spared in the welcome. An Olympic cap was tried for size, and this week the Prince will be raising funds for Britain's Olympic effort. But the main purpose is to promote a British retail fortnight. In Beverly Hills shops last year, over £100 million worth of British products were sold. The classiest goods sell best. There are more Rolls-Royces per head here than anywhere else in the world. The Prince's first major sortie, an official breakfast, was delayed because the security forces bomb-sniffing expert, a black Labrador, arrived late to check the venue. And California police found themselves sharing sentry duty. Prince Andrew launched the British fortnight with a dig at Fleet Street, which is well represented here.
As you probably know, we British are usually pretty silent over our breakfast cereal. Some feel the effects of the night before, and some are just content to leaf through the latest rubbish in the daily rags.
His championing of British enterprise went down well. He earned a standing ovation. Then he toured Beverly Hills stores. In one, dealing in Wedgwood china, he chatted to a master potter from Stoke-on-Trent. Later this week, he'll be feted by Hollywood stars at a show business banquet.
The Princess of Wales had a musical day today, though she admitted that when she was a schoolgirl, music was never her strong point. The Princess is patron of the National Children's Orchestra, and her first visit was marked by a special royal performance from the young musicians. There's invariably a present for Prince William on these occasions. Today's a tiny violin.
On behalf of the National Children's Orchestra, I'd like to give you this violin in the hope that Prince William will learn to enjoy music as you do.
Oh, thank you so much. That's lovely. Thank you so much.
Nelson's flagship, the Victory, was searched by police and firemen today after fires in the tower deck and the hold during the night. The two fires, which started within an hour of each other, are being treated as arson. There was little damage to the ship, just a few charred timbers. The fires were quickly spotted by staff and put out. The Victory, built in the 18th century, attracts thousands of tourists each year. A Dutch ship wrecked in a storm more than 200 years ago is to be salvaged. The skeleton of the Amsterdam is embedded in the shore at Hastings, and a team of Dutch archaeologists have begun a £4.5 million project to raise her and take her back to the Netherlands. The salvage operation, Holland's equivalent of the Mary Rose, could take up to 2 years. 8 years ago, Anita Roddick started a company with just £5,000 and an idea. She made cosmetics from vegetables and herbs. Today, the company was launched on the stock market, and it's worth nearly £10 million.
Anita Roddick started with one shop in Brighton. Now she has nearly 100 shops worldwide, with a factory, a warehouse, and 1 million customers a week. The winning formula was to put naturally based beauty products in simple bottles which could be refilled. And she saved more money by never advertising. This morning, Anita Roddick was on the floor of the stock exchange to sell 1 million shares in her company. By lunchtime, she knew that the £4,000 she'd started with is now worth nearly £10 million.
I don't know. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's absolutely unbelievable. I mean, when I look back and think, almost to the day, 8 years ago, I was writing these labels. I was thinking, my God, how am I going to price these products? And I couldn't believe when the door opened in Brighton and people actually walked in. And now.
Could you give a quick word of advice to people who might think they have a good idea and a few £1,000s spare cash?
Yes, I think energy, that's your best investment. Really, if you have a good idea, you stick to it and you sell it to anybody and everybody. And just don't accept no from the bank manager as I've done. Just think laterally, who else can I go to? Yeah, that's the answer.
2 football results tonight in Division 3, Bolton 2, Plymouth 1, Southend 2, Bradford City 1. Thousands of people lined the streets of Nottingham tonight to welcome Jane Torvill and Christopher Dean. They've gone back to their hometown to say thanks for the council grants which helped them on the road to international success.
They were both born in Nottingham and danced their way to the very top with help from their local council. So tonight, Torvill and Dean did a lap of honour around their city to say thank you. There were banners everywhere. A small plane streamed out a welcome home message over a city basking in evening spring sunshine. So the fans had turned out, all along the route from the newspaper shop run by Jane Torvill's parents, through the suburbs to the council house. And in the square, the crowd was waiting to the strains of that inevitable music. Over 4 years, Nottingham Council paid out more than £50,000 to enable the couple to leave their jobs and train for the Olympics. Tonight they returned past the office where Jane Torvill worked as an insurance clerk to the steps of the council house which Christopher Dean patrolled as a policeman. They already have the honorary freedom of the city, so tonight it was left to local people to show them how they felt about champions of Britain, Europe, the Olympics and the world. Christopher Dean replied.
But I'd just like to say to everybody in Nottingham, thank you, really, thank you very, very much.
and Nottingham celebrated with its ice dancers.
And tonight's main stories again. Michael Bettany, the MI5 man who tried to pass secrets to the Russians, has been jailed for 23 years at the Old Bailey. The judge told him he was a puerile, self-opinionated and dangerous man. As the miners' dispute enters its 6th week, trade union leaders have called on the government to intervene. And that's it from the newsroom for now. The late summary at around 5 to midnight. Till then, good night.
Breakfast time tomorrow goes training with a top British athlete who may get elbowed out of the Olympics by Zola Budd. The All-American housewife will be plying Prince Andrew with cocktails tomorrow. Don McLean sings live in the studio. Keith Chegwin takes your phone calls. There's round 2 of the video quiz, plus the gardening clinic with Alan Titchmarsh on Breakfast Time tomorrow from 6:30.
Good evening to you. There's some warmer weather on the way, but we're not going to get something for nothing. We're going to have to pay for it because as these frontal systems push in from the southwest, so they're going to give many parts of the country some cloud and outbreaks of rain. Let's, though, glance at the satellite picture because just a short time ago we had some of the this afternoon's showers still lingering, mostly in eastern parts of the country, clear skies everywhere else, but out to the west you already see this bank of cloud edging in towards Ireland. However, as far as tonight's concerned, well, no hint of warmer weather on the way for that. In fact, a jolly cold night in most parts of the country, a widespread frost. The last of those showers soon going from eastern parts, but 1 or 2 keeping going right through the night in that northern part of Scotland. And then tomorrow, well, much of the country starting off dry and bright with a good deal of sunshine. But in Northern Ireland and Western Scotland, it's not going to be long before that cloud pushes in from the west, and I think by around about the middle of the day, by lunchtime, you'll be seeing the first of the outbreaks of rain. And then during the course of the afternoon, that area of cloud and rain pushing its way across much of the rest of Scotland and getting into some northwestern parts of England and Wales as well. And some of the rain, especially in the northwest there on the heavy side. For most central and eastern areas of England, staying dry, staying fairly bright with a good deal of sunshine, the best of the sun in the southeast.
This year's Richard Dimbleby Lecture, established by the BBC in memory of my father, is being given by the Right Reverend David Shepherd, the Bishop of Liverpool, and it's called The Other Britain. Many people still remember David Shepherd as an outstanding cricketer. He was a formidable opening batsman. He was captain of Sussex, captain of England, for whom he played 22 times. But those battles of the cricket field were long ago replaced in Shepherd's life by the harsher struggles of Britain's decaying inner cities and the problems of those who live there. First as a Church of England priest, then as Bishop of Woolwich, and for the past 9 years as Bishop of Liverpool, David Shepherd's concerned himself not with what he calls comfortable Britain, but with the lives of 3 million people living in poverty in the other Britain. In his lecture, he'll be arguing that our attitudes to the poor in our society, to the unemployed, and to the running of the economy must change if, in his words, the spirit of the nation is not to be imprisoned.
The Right Reverend David Shepherd gives the Richard Dimbleby Lecture tomorrow at 9:25 on BBC1.
Horizon on 2 in about 4 minutes examines the mind of a murderer, Kenneth Bianchi, the American counterpart of the Yorkshire Ripper, who was interviewed using videotape, raising basic questions about criminal personality and the role of psychiatrists in court. On BBC1 at 11:15, Ian Johnston surveys the movie scene in Film 84, following our Cops and Robbers film, in which law enforcement is carried out in the outrageous and spectacular style of Freebie and the Bean. And the second programme is on BBC1 tomorrow afternoon at 12:20, repeated at midnight. Now, the news headlines from John Humphreys.
Michael Bettany, the MI5 man who tried to pass secrets to the Russians, has been sent to jail for 23 years. He was found guilty at the Old Bailey of 10 charges under the Official Secrets Act. Bettany had offered to spy for the Soviet Union for political reasons, but the Russians refused the offer, apparently because they suspected he was a double agent. The Lord Chief Justice, Lord Lane, said Bettany wouldn't have hesitated to disclose names which would almost certainly have led to death for more than one person. Bettany's solicitor said he'd be appealing against the conviction. The Prime Minister of Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe, says he's received a letter from Tiny Rowland apologising for an article in yesterday's Observer. Mr. Rowland owns the newspaper. Its editor, Donald Trelford, had described atrocities allegedly carried out by Zimbabwean soldiers in Matabeleland. Mr. Mugabe said Mr. Rowland unreservedly disassociated himself and his company from the article. It was discourteous and wrong for the editor to use what he called unsubstantiated material. Mr. Trelford said tonight he stood by every word of it. Mr. Rowland was not available for comment. Trade union leaders have called on the government to intervene in the coal dispute. The engineers' leader, Terry Duffy, said a national strike would be catastrophic, Britain's worst crisis for a decade. And TUC Chairman Ray Buckton said there should be negotiations over pit closures. Britain's chief police officers want random breathalyzer tests. That's one of a number of proposals submitted to a common select committee by the Association of Chief Police Officers. They also want a tougher driving test, motorway speed limits increased to 80 miles an hour, and to be allowed to test a driver's eyesight. The Nicaraguan government's admitted that guerrillas backed by America have captured a port near the border with Costa Rica after a 4-day siege. It's the first town the guerrillas have been able to take and hold, and they say they'll be setting up a provisional government. And finally, thousands of people turned out in Nottingham tonight to see Torvill and Dean return to their home city. And across the Atlantic in Boston, another Briton was taking on the world and winning. Jeff Smith from Liverpool won the Boston Marathon against 7,000 competitors. The conditions must have suited him, cold and wet. Good night.
Now, this is Tuesday evening on BBC1 with the continuing quest for the Young Musician of the Year at 6:40, featuring the Wind semi-final. In Wildlife on 1 at 7:15, David Attenborough takes us to the Shetlands to see the day-to-day activities of a rare and beautiful animal, the wild otter. Then at 7:40, Bill Beaumont and Emlyn Hughes head their teams of celebrities for a question of sport. The Dallas saga continues at 8:10, with Clayton's sister Jessica creating quite a stir after arriving at Southfork. At 9:25, this year's Richard Dimbleby lecture given by the Right Reverend David Shepherd, Bishop of Liverpool, whose message concerns the other Britain found amidst the poverty and unemployment of city areas. Our film, The Taking of Pelham 123, about a hijacking in the New York subway, is at 10:15, and finally, at midnight, the second Holy Week programme of 7 Days That Changed the World. BBC One's Tuesday evening. And now, our late look at the weather with Michael Fish.
Good evening to you. The weather's still chopping and changing. We've had a couple of warm days and a couple of somewhat colder ones, and now it looks as if it's going to be turning warmer again, but we're going to have to pay for it. It's not going to turn warm before most of us at least have had some cloud and rain, and that's going to be coming along with these frontal systems. Most of that rain, I think, will be over the more northwestern parts, where some of it could turn out to be fairly heavy. And then with the high pressure area sort of snuggling down to the south of us, we're then going to find ourselves in a few days in that run of southwesterly winds. So, as I said, warmer weather on the way, and the further towards the southeast you are, so the drier and brighter the weather. Of course, southwesterly winds are notorious for bringing a lot of cloud in off the Atlantic, and they're fairly moist too, and that means to say that northern and western areas will often be rather on the cloudy side, perhaps with a little rain from time to time. Anyhow, let's look at the picture for midday tomorrow, because there's the change beginning to take place. The high pressure is still to the south of us, but a warm front, you'll notice, pushing in across Ireland. Quite a few isobars, so the weather will end up quite breezy as well. However, when we look at tonight, it's far from warm. In fact, a jolly cold night over most parts of the country. A widespread frost, away that is from some coastal areas. One or two showers still scattered around, but before long I think they're going to be restricted really to that northern part of Scotland. And then for tomorrow, well, most places starting off dry, bright and quite sunny, but it's not going to be long before cloud arrives in Northern Ireland and western parts of Scotland. And I think by the end of the morning, certainly around about lunchtime, you'll find the first of the rain coming along, and some of the rain fairly heavy at that. And then during the course of the second part of the day, this cloud and rain working its way into many other northwestern parts, North Wales, northwest England, and right across probably to the rest of Scotland. And actually later on in the day, many of these other western parts of England and Wales may well become increasingly cloudy, and perhaps after dark there too you'll have a spot or two of rain. But for most of England and Wales, certainly central and eastern areas, The day staying dry, staying fairly bright with a fair amount of sunshine. The best of the sunshine in the southeast, where temperatures up to 13 centigrade or 55 Fahrenheit. That's it. A very good night to you.
If you've a parent, relative or friend who's elderly, try and help them stay away from high places.
Have you? Oh, beefing my doors again, eh?
See that things don't get stored on top of cupboards.
Like just lovely trees.
Keep them away from high places.
Hello, Grandad.
Take some of the risk out of life.
That was a public information film. And it's now almost 5 minutes past midnight, where we must call a halt for tonight on BBC1. Over on Radio 2, Brian Matthew is round midnight with music and guests for almost another hour. Then after 1 o'clock, it's Night Ride with Charles Nove in the driving seat. But now from BBC1 and me, Andy Cartledge, a very good night.